Hi guys, welcome back. It's time for chapter 14. I don't have anything to say this time. Let's get started. Mastermind Rise of Anarchy. Written by Clouds. My head in the clouds, not coming down. Read by MHA. Chapter 14. Bonds. Summary. Relationships are important to any story. Living with the League was a world apart from being raised by the Hero Commission. It was better, obviously, but there were still moments when it took some getting used to. He was living in a hideout full of murderers, so logically, they should be at each other's throats constantly, threatening to kill one another and seeking underground medical attention when fights came to blows. But, except for one on rare occasions, it wasn't like that at all. For the most part, they bonded over their shared trauma and what society had put them through, and they took care of each other. It was just still so weird that he had always instinctively frozen in fear whenever he saw one of his handlers, but he could walk around a house full of killers just fine. That's not to say that everything was perfect. Fights still broke out, but they were mostly about whose turn it was to go steal another game controller after Shigaraki dusted one of theirs. And if it came to blows, it was because they decided to settle the argument with a spar. It felt like more of a family than Keigo ever had. More than anything, the League took care of each other, and they didn't shame each other as they recovered from various traumas they'd gone through before their time in the League. A lot of them, including Keigo and the Todoroki brothers, had been forced to grow up far too fast, and never really had a chance to just be kids before they were crushed by the entire weight of the world. So Keigo supposed that he really shouldn't be surprised when there had been a silent argument to make up for that last time. Are you sure about this? He glanced up at Toga suspiciously. You're not just telling me to do this because you want to see me bloodied up, are you?
It's a universal experience, Hawks. Toga rolled her eyes dramatically. Just get on one of the mattresses and let me push you down the stairs already.
You do realize that if anything goes wrong, you can just fly away, right? W was leaning against the wall with his arm crossed, smirking at Keigo as he watched him make a fool of himself. What else are those pretty little wings made for if not keeping you safe while you do stupid stunts? Keigo couldn't help but blush even as he shot Dobby a glare. For your information, these wings are not airbeds for sledding inside. What if you ran into a wall? I'll record it, Shoto volunteered, already holding up his phone. Never mind. I'll do that anyways. Gotta have blackmail when Izuku gets back. Come on, I thought you were a hawk, not a chicken. Keigo glared at him before sitting down cross-legged on the mattress that Spinner had found in a dumpster the last time he'd gone out. He took a deep breath and nodded for Toga to push him, but immediately panicked as soon as the mattress actually started inching forward. Wait, are you even sure this is safe? This is ridiculous. Dobby rolled his eyes and pushed himself off the wall. Come on, pretty bird, let's go. Keigo was about to ask what he meant when Dobby charged forward and jumped onto the mattress behind him, wrapping his arms around Keigo's waist as the momentum of his pushing pushed the mattress far enough forward for gravity to take hold. Keigo gave a distressed chirp and gripped the mattress tightly. They bounced roughly down the stairs. Dobby laughed loudly behind him. He could hear the rest of the League cheering them on from the top of the stairs as air rushed past them. It wasn't that different from flying. Honestly, Keigo knew that he had no right to be scared of such a simple thing, especially when Dobby was right. He could use his feathers to bail out at any moment. But the Hero Commission had trained him to ingrain in him a sense of risk and reward. Anything reckless or frivolous was shamed out of him in favor of creating a perfect hero. So using an old ratty mattress to slide down the stairs had been entirely out of the question. Keigo grinned. That was then, but this was now. Keigo was free. Birdie, Dobby breathed in his ears. Those feathers might be a good idea right about now. Keigo looked back at him in confusion. What? Dabi jerked his chin forward, and Kaguya looked ahead, only to realize that yes, they were about to run into the wall. For some reason, though, he decided rather than getting whiplashed by using his feathers to pull them to a sudden stop, he bailed sideways, and since Dabi was still holding on to him, he came with him. The two tumbled across the landing, coming to a stop in a mess of tangled limbs and feathers, as the mattress hit the wall with a sudden, soft thud. Kaguya smiled as he tried to catch his breath, only to suddenly lose the ability to breathe as he realized that Dabi somehow ended up on top of him during the whole landing process. To make it worse, Dabi was just as out of breath as he was. He was an asshole, and the asshole was smirking down at him, bracing his arms tightly right by Kaguya's head, propping himself up. So, Brody, what do you think? Pretty fun, right? All Kaguya could do was manage a nod and a strangled chirp before Shoto reached out to them. That was awesome. How much you want to bet that would go viral if we posted it on YouTube? They'd let it stay up for more than 5 minutes, Spinner scoffed. We're villains. They take it down immediately before it could get any attraction. Dabi managed to untangle himself and offered a hand to help Kaguya as he sent a few feathers to carry the mattress back up the stairs. Alright, the League had a point. This might be frivolous and reckless, but it was definitely worth it.
Alright, Shiggy, you're up. Toga yelled. No! Shiggy! Get back here! It's your turn!
Fumikage waited at the gates for Monoma to show up, dark shadow around his shoulders like a protective parrot. His quirk hadn't said anything, but Fumikage could tell that he had been protective lately, choosing to remain by his shoulders or on his lap, even in the sunlight, rather than tucked away in his chest, what would have been normal a few months ago. Fumikage silently appreciated the effort. It was always nice to have a visual reminder that he wasn't as alone as he felt sometimes. The sun was setting by the time Monoma showed up, but to Fumikage's surprise, he wasn't alone. Eri was holding his hand and hurrying along beside him, staring at Dark Shadow with large eyes as they got closer. Fumikage frowned. Was a political discussion group really the best place for a small child? Sorry, Aizawa had last-minute patrol, Monoma explained, and I promised Eri we'd get ice cream on the way. Don't worry, Aizawa's already approved him. I told him you'd be coming along, so she's gonna have 2 strong heroes protecting her. Isn't that right, Eri?
3.
Eri corrected softly. Monoma looked at Fumikage in confusion, but when he just shrugged, Monoma turned back to Eri. What do you mean? Eri looked a little insecure, but dutifully pointed to Monoma. 1. She moved her finger to point at Fumikage. 2. She paused for a moment, looking for Monoma's permission to continue. When he nodded encouragingly, she pointed at Dark Shadow. 3. Fumikage's eyes widened in surprise, but he smiled as he felt Dark Shadow puff up, and his happiness contagious through the link. Despite everything she'd been through in her short life, Eri still managed to be an extremely sweet girl. Dark Shadow apparently felt the same way, because he had left his place on Fumikage's shoulder and butted his beak playfully against her hand. Eri's eyes widened as she took a frightened step back, clinging to Monoma's shirt as she peeked from behind his back. Monoma laughed. How silly of me to forget Dark Shadow. Of course there's 3 of us. He crouched down and spoke softly as he ran a hand through Eri's hair. Hey, there's no need to be scared. Dark Shadow is not gonna hurt you. Eri peeked around Monoma, and Dark Shadow gave her a thumbs up. She looked like she was considering it for a brief moment, then buried her face in Monoma's shoulder. Fumikage stood there awkwardly, unsure if he and Dark Shadow should just go home. He didn't want to make Eri uncomfortable, especially if she heard the rumors going around that he was a villain waiting to turn. With her history, she had even more reason to be terrified of villains than the rest of them did. She and Monoma were having a full whispered conversation. that Fumikage couldn't quite make out. But after a few moments, Monoma smiled. I could borrow your quirk and show you. How about that? Eri hesitated a moment, then gave a quick nod. Monoma reached his hand out to touch her hair, a horn growing on his head the moment he did so. He shrugged apologetically, then turned back to them. Eri's afraid she's going to hurt Dark Shadow. Her quirk can be a little scary sometimes, but that's okay. Just because it's something scary doesn't mean you have to be scared of it. Yeah, Dark Shadow said excitedly. I'm a scary quirk too, but I'm not going to hurt you, and I don't think you're going to hurt me either. He rushed forward and leaned into Monoma's touch as he scratched his beak. See, Eri? You have great control of your quirk. You're not going to hurt him. Fumikage nodded encouragingly as Eri shyly lifted up her hand, Dark Shadow moving slowly, giving Eri plenty of time to snatch it back before he gently nudged her hand with his beak. Her eyes were wide, but she didn't move away. It seemed like everyone was holding their breath. Then Eri giggled. It was a small sound that lasted less than a second, but Dark Shadow puffed up in pride and pushed more eagerly into her hand as she started to rub his beak gently. She didn't smile, but her eyes were happy, and Fumikage couldn't help smiling slightly as well. Watching her play with Dark Shadow like this was like a bright light in the midst of the thick darkness. It was adorable. All right, Monoma grinned, and stood up, grabbing Eri's free hand as he did so. Now that we all know each other, are you ready to go? Eri nodded eagerly and squeezed Monoma's hand a little tighter. Dark Shadow stuck close to her, hovering around her shoulders with the same protectiveness he usually showed Fumikage as they left campus. Fumikage glanced down at Eri and smiled again. Perhaps the world wasn't quite enshrouded with darkness as it had felt of late. Or perhaps, Fumikage thought, as Dark Shadow nudged Eri's cheek playfully, perhaps they were responsible for creating their own light to disperse the shadows. Ochako rewrapped her wrists and cracked her neck as she squared up for another round with the punching bag. Everyone else had gone to bed a while ago, but even though she assured Sue that she was going to bed too, here she was. There was only much tossing and turning a girl could take before she got frustrated and needed to do something productive. She needed to get some of the energy out, at least since no one was awake to spar with her. Solo training it was. She grunted as she punched the bag hard enough to make it shake, then wound up punching it again, imagining it was Shoto or Midoriya or Shigaraki or any villain she could think of. She didn't understand why so many people were siding with the villains these days. Didn't they remember everything the heroes had sacrificed for them? Didn't they care that there were people out there risking their lives to keep them safe? It was so frustrating. How was she supposed to keep people safe from villains who hid in plain sight, then toppled the heroes left and right? She heard a small hum behind her and whirled around, ready to a fight, only to see an empty room. Hagakure? Is that you? She didn't relax as she waited for an answer, lowering herself into a fighting stance as she caught movement in the shadows by the door. She stood down when Nezu stepped out of the shadows and gave her a smile. I must apologize. I didn't mean to startle you, young Ochako. Ochako let out a frustrated sigh as she turned back to her punching bag. It's all right, I guess. I'm kinda high-strung these days. Eventually, I should be able to punch all that nervous energy out, right? Nezu laughed. That's quite the spirit. We indeed need hero like you. What we need is to stop running scared, she growled, resuming her punching routine. If we just disappeared into the shadows and refused to actually fight these villains, we're no better than they are. I quite agree, Nezu said simply. Unfortunately, many heroes only see the evils taking over the world and are blinded to obligate to combat them. I hate it. Ochako emphasized her words with another punch.
I just want to get rid of all these stupid villains and have it done with.
That's what being a hero is all about, Nezu said. I'm very impressed with your efforts recently. You're becoming a promising young hero. Uraraka shook out her hand and grabbed her water bottle. I'm just trying to feel like I just feel like I haven't been doing enough. The villains always seem to cheat and end up 2 steps ahead, while the rest of us are stuck playing catch up. It's frustrating. It is, Nezu agreed. But for what it's worth, we are proud of your efforts to do so. Ochako felt tired. A swell of happiness took a swig of water.
Thanks, Principal Nezu. It means a lot. I'd probably get better be going to bed though. Long day tomorrow.
Nezu nodded. Of course. Sleep well, young Uraraka. I'm excited to see what you become. Shoto liked the isolation of his patrol. His favorite moments had been when he was perched on a rooftop overlooking the dark streets and waiting like a cat ready to pounce. With everything that had been on his plate recently, moments like these were rare. So when another hero had announced their retirement that afternoon and looking for someone to take the shift, he volunteered to take one. Monoma had said that he and Tokoyami were going to visit some friends, but that they'd be home by her bedtime, so she wouldn't have to be alone while he was gone. He felt guilty that he hadn't taken the time to take Eri and show her the city. She didn't deserve to spend any more time of her childhood locked up, even if the walls of UA were designed to keep her safe, not keep her in. He was also hoping that Eri might help Tokoyami come out of his shell a little more, vice versa. He didn't know how to stop the other students from pulling away from Tokoyami, especially after what they had all gone through when Todoroki had joined the League of Villains. They didn't want to hurt that way again, which Shota could respect, even if he didn't like how they were going about it. But Eri wasn't scared of villains, even when she probably should be. There was no way she could avoid Tokoyami, no matter what the rumors people spread. In fact, as much as he hated to admit it, Tokoyami's connection to Hawks, by extension, the League would probably make her trust him even more. He hoped that it would be a good balance and give her a hero to look up to that wasn't a villain, because she needed more of those. There was a crash a few alleys over and Shota sped across the rooftops in a blur and swung down, kicking someone's to the ground and turning back to check the unconscious figure they had been standing over. To his surprise, he had actually recognized the guy on the ground, a repeated offender who had the habit of too many muggings and even more drug charges. But he was even more surprised when he reached for his cuffs and realized the guy had already zip-tied on his wrists. He turned to the other person who was gripping their chest where Shota had kicked them, and chuckled as they got to their feet. Long time no see, Aizawa-sensei. Miss me? Aizawa's eyes narrowed as he took in the person in front of him. They were obviously a vigilante, since they weren't in a designated patrol, and he didn't recognize their costume. Though he did recognize some aspects of it, and they looked oddly familiar. Shiguro. Shiguro chuckled sadly. Yeah, sorry. Expulsion wasn't enough to kill my dreams of being a hero. Would have been easier if I'd been, I guess. But oh well. Eraser looked carefully at his former student. He had changed a lot in the past few years, but on closer inspection, his bald head and pointed ears made him easy to recognize now that Shota knew they knew each other from. He could see the homages to his first hero costume that Shirogiro had incorporated into his vigilante outfit. He had gotten more confident too, apparently, considering that his tendency to flinch and run away from fights was a large part of what contributed to his expulsion in the first place. It would have been nice to stay at UA, Shiguro sighed. Honestly, I thought it was all over. I was too terrified to break the law and go vigilante, but after I found out we don't need a license anymore, I figured I might as well give it a second chance, right? Shota nodded. He was probably far from the only one to think along those lines in recent months. He gestured to the body on the ground. You did this? Shigeru nodded timidly. Yeah, but, I'm not one of those vigilante who beat up their victims to a bloody pulp. I'm not, or anything. I'm not king. Shota looked up at him suspiciously. King? Shigeru laughed. I forgot, the police probably don't call him that, but I'm sure you've heard of them anyways. I don't think they've left a single villain that wasn't immediately rushed to the hospital. Nasty burns, bruises, even a couple broken bones from what I've heard. The rest of us try to avoid them if we can. Shota groaned. He had heard of this vigilante. They were notoriously violent and antisocial, and when their victims were lucky, or unlucky, enough to see them, the layers of ash on their face helped blend in with the shadows to prevent though few criminals from giving an unusable description. At first, the police had assumed it was Dabi, but he usually looked at Todoroki these days, and there hadn't been any ice found on scenes. Besides, Dabi would have just burned out the corpses, and he didn't punch his victims out white, he burned them. You call him king? Shota finally said. Why, why, is that what they call themselves? Shigeru shrugged. No idea. Sorry. They don't talk to anyone. It's obviously we try not to seek them out, but a couple vigilantes heard them grumbling to themselves, and apparently they've they've said king a few times, so the name just stuck. Shota sighed. Thanks for the info. I can't take you in for excessive use of that force or vigilantism, but you knew that already. Stay safe out there, kid. Hope your second try goes better than your first. Go ahead, rub salt in the wound, won't you? Shigeru spat out, eyes widening when he realized he said that loud enough for Aizawa to hear. I'm sorry, Sensei. I just understood. Shota cut him off, pushing away a sense of guilty nausea. I'm the one who expelled you. It's normal to be bitter about that. Shigeru's shoulders slumped in relief. Thanks. And you stay safe out there too. Okay, Sensei? Shota nodded. I'll try. Shigeru gave him a shaky smile, and Shota let himself melt away into the shadows as he called the police to take away the criminal. Expelling students like him had seemed like the right decision at the time, but now Shota couldn't help but wonder how many of his former problem children were doing the same thing as Shigeru was, taking at their second chance of heroism. More importantly, how many of them were going to become vigilantes like King? I do want to read the notes real quick, just for my own clarification and yours. Shigeru is a recycled OC. For those of you who haven't seen me do this before, I have a handful of OCs that I've created in various fics, and when I have a situation I don't want or can't use a canon character for whatever reason, I bring in these guys. But they are more flexible between stories, especially when things like ages and backstories. Shin Shigeru was originally created to be a support student in cheat codes. Here's what he looks like. And the page isn't working for me, so I can't edit in a photo of him. If I can later, I will definitely try. But yeah, I guess Cloud's OC. For those of you who haven't read any of the fics before, this is my first fic, so I'm gonna have to go check that out later when I'm done with Mastermind, or when I'm just reading. But yeah, it's kind of my conclusion. Yeah, I know I've said this before. I mean, I don't really know chapters. I think that was the last chapter I've read before podficking it, so the next ones might be a little bit, due to the fact that I haven't read them before, you know. But anyways, I hope you guys have a great day, and yeah, stay hydrated, drink water, whatever. You definitely should. You should. It's good for you. I have to be better about that too. But yeah, anyway guys, have a great day, and I will see you in the next chapter.